Hi everybody, this is High Tech High Unboxed, and I'm Alec Patton. My first teaching job was at High Tech High North County, and one thing I needed to do was run an elective for the final hour of the day. Every teacher had one, and we all got to choose what we taught. I got a really good piece of advice from a colleague, shout out to Sonia Ramirez. She told me to do a sport. That way, the kids got exercise and I wouldn't need to do any planning, I'd just keep an eye on things. So my elective was Ultimate Frisbee, and Sonia was right. It worked like a dream. A couple years later, I moved to High Tech High Chula Vista. I was still a new teacher and I wasn't confident about much, but I knew I had the perfect elective. Ultimate Frisbee, let's go. There was just one problem. High Tech High North County had a touch football elective and a soccer elective, so kids who signed up for Ultimate Frisbee wanted to play Ultimate Frisbee. High Tech High Chula Vista had neither. In fact, if a kid wanted to run around for an hour outside, they had exactly one option. That's right, Ultimate Frisbee. As it shook out, most of the kids in my Ultimate Frisbee elective wanted to play soccer. A vociferous minority wanted to play football. On a typical day, everyone would argue for about 20 minutes about what to play. Then the game would start, giving them the opportunity to move on to arguing about the line of scrimmage or the offsides rule, depending on the sport. On one of the rare days that we played Frisbee, a kid got a concussion from diving for a pass. When a student asked me if I'd help her start an elective for students who wanted to put on a Shakespeare play, I couldn't say yes fast enough. And thus ended my career as an Ultimate Frisbee coach. I hadn't thought about that elective for years, but today's story brought it all back, for reasons that will become apparent soon enough. Now, I found out about this story from my colleague Ryan Gallagher. He told me I had to hear it. He heard it from Robin Snyder at last year's National Summit on Improvement in Education. And let me be clear, Robin wasn't presenting at the conference, she was just in an advisory group with Ryan. That's what Summit's like, heavy hitters everywhere you look. The people next to you in the coffee line are telling better stories than you'll hear from some keynotes. And you can be at the next one. It'll go from March 30th to April 1st this year in San Diego, California. We've got a link in the show notes so you can reserve a spot right away. Today's story is set in Clovis Unified School District near Fresno, California. Robin Snyder, who told Ryan about it, is Director of Supplemental Services. Like me, you may not know exactly what the Director of Supplemental Services does. Here's Robin to explain.
I oversee a lot of programs within the district, including EL services, migrant education, the Title VI grant funding for the district. And then I also get the opportunity to work with our GISs, which is an equivalent to a vice principal in our district. And then I also oversee all of the things that we're doing around continuous improvement within the district.
Along with Robin, I talked to Ray Gomez, the principal of Janet L. Young Elementary School, and JJ Donnett, who's the guidance instructional specialist at the school. He tells me that's basically the equivalent of a vice principal. In the summer of 2024, Ray and JJ realized their school had a problem. In the previous school year, the suspension rate for African American students had been 8.7%. Now, I apologize because this is a spoiler, but in the next school year, they would cut that suspension rate for African American students to 4.2%, which is to say they cut it in half and then some. So I wanted to know how they did it. First of all, Ray attributes their success to this group that Robin started of principals from Clovis East and Clovis South who got together to figure out how to improve suspension rates at their schools. I asked Robin how she put this group together.
So the very first thing I did, obviously, was look at the overall data. In looking at the overall data district-wide, I did see that there were some schools in that area that I already had built-in relationships with that had higher level suspension rates than some of our other schools. Not necessarily the highest in the district, but again, going back to that relationship piece, that was going to be important for me because I knew that I would feel comfortable working alongside all of the principals in that area, and I felt like they would feel comfortable working alongside me, not as I'm telling them they have to do this, but hey, how can I support you in this work in decreasing suspension rates? So that is when I reached out to the Clovis East area superintendent and the principals to say, here's what we have, this is what it looks like. Will you guys join me in this work? And luckily, they all said yes.
One thing about Clovis Unified, and we pride ourselves on our relationships here, just the structure that's set up from the admin standpoint. A majority of our administrators here were once either students or teachers in Clovis Unified, and then you get to spend some time as a GIS like JJ is doing now. And work your way into a learning director position and then into a principalship. So along the way, you build lots and lots of relationships. You have lots of mentors along the way. Clovis Unified does a really good job of sharing stories of great leaders who have come through this district. And I think it's just a great value that we have here in support of each other. So, of course, when Robin calls us and says, "Hey, we're going to do this work," we're all on board, and we're going to give everything we got to show improvement in the areas that we're working on.
So Ray and JJ took the call. And what do you do when you start a continuous improvement process? You dig into the data. And they quickly zeroed in not just on 2 grade levels, but on about a half an hour of the school day for those grade levels. Here's Ray.
So here at Young Elementary School, the group of students that were having the highest rate of referrals, office referrals, was really our 5th and 6th grade boys. So that was the big picture. We had to look at how many referrals were coming in and when that was happening, right? And so what we came to the conclusion was that every time we had an office referral for behavior and physical contact of some sort, it was during unstructured time, so like our recess times. So one of the things that we did was we took a look at that data, and then we set a goal around what would we be doing to target that group.
So you said office referrals. So is it kind of like once an office referral happens, a suspension is more likely? Was that the thinking?
Yes, absolutely.
Like our 5th and 6th grade group was the group that we were receiving the most office referrals for.
So that's like a kid hitting another kid.
Yeah, pushing down, hitting, playing too rough at recess, anything like that.
So mapping this out, like the process is kid hits another kid. The kid who did the hitting gets referred to the office. Once they're in the office, there's a set of disciplinary procedures, and those lead to suspension. Is that a fair representation?
It could lead to suspension. It could lead to other interventions, just depending on the severity of the behavior from the student.
Yeah. So that's what I'm curious about, because like if you're mapping this out, like if I'm thinking about the different ways of like lowering suspensions, like one thing is you could just stop suspending kids for hitting each other. Like, how are you looking at that process? How did you decide what part of the process to tackle?
So going back to them looking at their original data, they had looked at both the data from the previous year at the very beginning of the year and kind of identified that their 4th graders were a high suspended group. So at the beginning of the year, then, when we were first starting this, is when they looked at it and said, let's see what the referrals look like from our 5th and 6th graders, since those were the highest suspended from the previous year. Then they dug down deeper into their data and really looked at what is the highest offense we see. And that is where it came to digging down and finding out that the recess behavior was the highest, area of the campus. The highest part of the day was during that lunch recess time when kids were out at lunch and during that unstructured time. And the highest offense was the physical contact. So that's how they kind of decided their change idea around incorporating structured play during 5th and 6th grade recess as the area that they were going to test. And JJ and Ray did a phenomenal job getting teachers on board and being a part of that test group.
So you got this time where kids are hitting each other, basically. And so was it just looking at the data, at the like numbers? Was there other stuff? How did you settle on that as your area?
Well, what we realized with this group is that they were extremely competitive in athletics. So they hadn't really learned on how to navigate through situations. For instance, if they're, say, playing a basketball game and somebody fouled somebody else. Yeah. Instead of calling a foul, going out of bounds and throwing the ball in and handing the ball over to the next student, it became an argument. It became something a little more aggressive, which typically would lead even back to the classroom, and those tempers would still be escalated. And we just saw that across the board with all of our 5th and 6th grade boys and any kind of competition it was. So we really thought about, well, how can we structure that and teach them how to behave appropriately in these types of situations? And that's how we came to the conclusion of creating intramurals during those unstructured times led by teachers.
I think the data really set the tone for where to start to look, but we also reached out to other people. We talked to their teachers. We said they're coming back into class, like Mr. Gomez said, they're coming back into the class, they're all fired up. Like, what are you seeing from a teacher perspective when they're returning from that unstructured time? We talked to the students. We asked them what's leading to these issues where there's office referrals or physical contact happening at recess. So we got the perspective of the students, and then we talked to the parents as well.
So what did the students say?
Similar to what Mr. Gomez said, the students said, well, they're cheating. They're not playing fairly. The game was over, and the last shot didn't count. And so it just led to an argument. We really do believe that competitions are very important, here at Young Elementary, but these kids didn't actually know how to compete. They just assumed that everybody else was playing unfairly if they did not win. It was interesting to hear their perspective because it was always the other person's fault. It was interesting.
Was that particularly egregious with this cohort, with this fourth grade then fifth grade group?
Yes. Since I've been here, it's been the same cohort from fourth to fifth to sixth grade. They're in seventh grade now, but that cohort continuously over the years has been the what I would consider ultra competitive group.
And just a little side note. I know we don't like talking about this very often, but you really look at the group, that cohort, and they were behind a screen in those early kindergarten, first grade years when they're learning how to socialize with each other. So it was something that we really had to go back to and teach again.
I was going to ask about that. I was wondering about where they fell in that. What, and then you talked to the parents too. What were they saying?
We'd call home for disciplinary issues, and then students would go home. They would tell their version of the story, and then parents would come back to us with their version of the story, and then we'd have to kind of lay it all out for them. And they were looking for the same thing. They were looking for ways for us to better the relationships between our students. A lot of them played outside of school, different recreation sports together as well. And so JJ and myself took it upon ourselves to meet with some of those heavy hitter kiddos, their parents, and bring them in together and kind of resolve some of the conflicts just as a team. So we really wanted to include our community. So it didn't seem like an isolated thing here just on campus. It was relationships that they were going to build not only here, but outside in our community as well.
How'd those meetings go?
We have a really, really great community. And so if you set the ground rules on how we're going to conversate, one person talking at a time, and be ready to listen to everyone's perspective, be more solution oriented, those meetings go really well. So we found that by meeting together with members of the community, it really did a lot of benefit for our students.
Yeah, I think it was interesting because like the conversations that we were having weren't always just like a joyful, happy conversation. But setting those expectations of like, hey, we're here to help students. We're here to help your kids. We're here to build these relationships and make sure that we're doing what's best for students always. And once we kind of set that tone, everybody was kind of on the same team looking for the same answer to this, ongoing issue we had.
Let's recap what Ray, JJ, and the team had done so far. They'd looked at suspension data and found one group was getting sent to the office more than anyone else, and they were getting sent during recess. Then they talked to the students and their families in order to get more insight into what was going on. And then they did something so simple, but so smart. They looked at what these hyper-competitive kids were doing when they played sports outside of school.
Where was the issues? Like, why can these kids go to like a structured football practice and be teammates and play against each other in a scrimmage against their teammates and be fine? But then they go to recess and play football and they fall apart, even though they're teammates after school. So I think we started and looked at that perspective of like, okay, what are we missing here? What are we missing compared to the recess time, compared to the after school sports? Because there was no conflict in after school sports. They were listening to their coaches. Everything was great. They had productive practices. They were helping each other out, But then they were coming the next day at recess time, and it was all falling apart. I think that's where really, like, that perspective kind of shifted us and helped us kind of get us where we needed to be, or at least a starting spot.
So that the theory makes sense to me. How did you do it? Like, by definition, teachers are on break. That's one of the nice things about recess. I see an immediate as a former teacher, I see an immediate problem.
And I think that's what's so great about our community is that our teachers are willing to jump in. Our teachers are willing to help us, find a solution. And so, yeah, some teachers did give up, some of their break time. They rotated it throughout the school year so that we always had an adult who was in charge of the intramurals. A lot of times they are our sports coaches as well. So they already have these built-in relationships with the athletes. We had 4 meetings throughout the year, where we went back and we looked at the structure of the program and what was going well and what wasn't, and what tweaks we had to make. And everyone brought the information that we needed to make it work. So again, it wasn't just us; it was the teachers and the new names and everyone who was involved in our program.
And Alec, can I just add to that? When they had their huddles and they were looking at the data to see, did this change, result in fewer referrals and fewer suspensions? they did an excellent job making sure that the teacher or the teachers that were running the intramurals were part of that conversation, because the teacher who was out there was really giving them the feedback, right? This was working, or I still see this happening. So how can we tweak this, or what can we add to address this issue? Because while the intramurals might have been working to curb the behaviors that were happening during the play, then what they discovered was maybe then some kids were kind of like talking a little bit of smack, and then the teacher would added character lessons. So this was just a continuous cycle for them throughout the last few years, where they've been really working on refining it to decrease those rates.
So when you say intramurals, did you literally start calling recess intramural sports?
It was interesting because when we first started, we had this idea that we were going to start these intramural sports during recess time, right? It was a big worry of ours of like, well, we're going to have this targeted intervention, but we're not going to make kids do it in the beginning. We're just going to open it up to everybody and then see what happens. At least me, I was really worried that the kids that we were really going to need to target were not going to go into the intramurals. They were just going to continue to play unstructured. And so, we gave it a shot, and teachers got on board. And the kids that were so ultra competitive, as soon as we told them there's going to be a winner and there's going to be somebody who loses, they were all on board. They were like, yes, I'm in.
But I think one of the other pieces was some of those really highly competitive kids became referees. So when they weren't playing, they were actually a referee, or maybe they were a sideline judge, or they were crowd control to make sure that, because kids actually would go and watch these sporting events as well, so they played a role, and it all just worked out that way where either they were reffing or they were crowd control or they were playing. So they were involved in some way, even if they weren't necessarily in the game at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting perspective too, because those kids are the kids who are arguing with the refs. They're arguing with other kids, and now the kids are arguing with them, and they see, oh, this is not as fun as I thought it was. So,
yeah. So it changed the perspective, right. Absolutely.
I want to understand some kind of brass tacks of this. So first of all, how long is this recess?
Of unstructured time, it's 25 minutes.
So it's recess, kids are going, they're doing whatever they're doing their imaginative play, or they're making something, or they're sitting and quietly reading their book, or they're going and playing a game, or they're playing tag. Like, what happens? So kids come outside, and how do they know that this new option exists?
First, we gathered feedback from the students. We put it out to them, say, hey, we're going to start doing intramural sports at recess time. And then we put out a survey to all the students, said, what do you want to do? How can we get the most kids to sign up? And they gave us feedback, and then did it in 6-week cycles. So we started with football, and then we had a week break, collected feedback again during that week.
How did you collect feedback, and what were you getting?
We would huddle as our team. So the first huddle that we had was after the 6 weeks. The teacher gave us feedback that said, this is going really well. The issue is the kids are just running out to the field and wanting to play immediately. Like, they're not ready to play yet, but they want to jump right into it. So that's where we made the change, where they were going to leave lunch like 5 to 7 minutes early to meet the teacher at the classroom. The teacher was going to go over the expectations and the rules every single day that they were playing, and then the teacher would walk them out to start the structured game. So those huddles really gave us an opportunity to kind of change things and adjust. After the second huddle, so another 6 weeks went by, one of the changes was we need a new sport. Like, the kids are done with football. They're kind of burnt out on it. We're starting to argue a little bit again. We collected feedback from students again. And then we kind of just adjusted as we needed every 6 weeks as we huddled together.
So what was the next sport? What replaced football?
Kickball.
That was the number one from the kids?
Yeah, kickball. Kickball was not as great as we thought it was going to be. We really had this expectation that kickball was going to be awesome because we could have a lot of kids playing at one time with multiple games.
Yeah.
The issue with kickball is all of the students already knew how to play kickball. There was a lot of students that considered themselves experts, which led to them arguing about the rules. We did kickball for the 6 weeks, and then we switched right away. Yeah, we went to something else. We realized that it wasn't as productive as we thought it was.
What are the best sports, now that you've been doing this for a while?
The kids like soccer. There are students who are really honed in and really good at soccer, and then you have students who are just out there to kick the ball and have fun. That one was really good because the teams were big, and we were able to bring in big soccer goals, made it a big thing, had a big tournament.
When did you start seeing a difference in suspensions? Or I guess in referrals even would be more where you'd really start.
I think we started right after our first session, going back and looking at the data. JJ does a really good job of collecting all those referrals. He has a system that he uses. And so as we went back and we looked at some of those students that were kind of like our heavy hitters, we noticed that reduction in referrals was significant for that group of kids.
Wow. That must be gratifying.
It was kind of like a relief, like, oh wow, it's gonna be okay.
So where are you at now with this? I mean, obviously you've had this dramatic shift in suspensions. Is this new structure sustainable? Like, I can see a teacher being like, yeah, I can do that for 6 weeks. But now you're kind of talking about, well, this is the new normal. Or are you talking about this being the new normal?
The intramurals switches based on the need of the grade level. So we were able to follow the intramurals with this particular cohort through fifth and sixth grade, and now they're in seventh grade. They're at their intermediate school. So now the next group we're targeting is our new fifth grade boys. They don't have as many referrals as that first cohort we started with, but we can kind of see as the year is starting to progress of like, okay, these boys need a little bit more structure because we see them possibly, heading in that direction, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help.
Now, one thing we haven't talked about the kind of racial aspect of this, but that's obviously part of the data is that this, and I'm not quite sure how to articulate this, but like it's interesting to me that like you have an issue of racial disparity and you have a means of tackling it that has nothing obvious to do with race.
The concept behind that is that we have always, since the start of this school, have really built a culture of inclusivity. So we don't really technically look at it that way. We look at it as like the whole group, right? How can we teach kids to treat each other with respect? We say here that your words and your actions matter. How are we teaching kids in every day and every area that we have to work through problems in a positive manner? So we're also a school who is a Green Shield Award winner for a positivity project. Every single day we're talking about those character traits that positivity brings to the table. Our teachers are doing lessons in the classroom, and it all ties in together on our culture, our overall culture here at Young Elementary, and how we treat every member of our community.
And so you've got this system that you can use, that you can tailor to specific grade levels. What's the future for this?
When I look at the like you were talking about earlier, the sustainability of it, right? In terms of the future, I would love to get I think our big picture is how can we train up our fifth and sixth graders to go out to the first and second grade recess and run it for them. So how can we build capacity in those, what we could call like a junior coach? How can we build capacity in those kids to bring it to the little kids so it's a sustainable thing? How can we make it more self-sustainable of like, okay, let's build capacity with our students in order to bring it down to our primary students so that by the time they get to that fifth and sixth grade, they already have that experience and now they can become the coaches. And it's like a cycle.
Oh, that's cool.
And I think too, when we first started, it was unknown, right? Will this work or will it not work? But ultimately, the whole idea behind us and the team here was that we knew that if it failed, we could change it and try something different. So we weren't really afraid to fail because we knew that anything that we did to help kids learn how to play more efficiently and more kindly with each other would make a difference in their behavior.
Robin and our district really pushed that with us, was like, go ahead and try these things, right? And don't be afraid to fail, because we're going to come back to the table and talk about it and make those adjustments in order to, make sure that our students are successful.
Has this rolled out to any other schools? Has anybody else expressed an interest?
Yeah, we have a few other elementary schools in the Clovis East and Clovis South areas who also have tried intramurals as well. Yeah.
How's it going? Has it seemed replicable, or is this like just a special unicorn case?
No, it's definitely replicable. In fact, JJ did a task card for us, which kind of basically laid out his whole plan, how their school rolled it out from beginning to the end of the first year, step by step. So any other school could pick up his card and say like, okay, this is how Young rolled it out. Here's what the pieces of that we're going to duplicate and try as well. Or maybe, we don't want to start with football. We're going to start with soccer or whatever. So he did make that available for our other schools so that they could see his starting point and all the adjustments he even made throughout the time that we were working on this project.
And I think one other thing too is Robin did a really good job of putting everything on a Padlet. So we can look at any other school who's participating in this theory of improvement and look at what their goals are, some of the things that are going on their campuses, and how they tackled, whatever it is that they've done, so that we could reach out to those principals and GISs and get an idea of how to run one of those programs on our campus. So this is not just about the intramurals that we're doing, but I mean, you can find a school that has a different issue, and you can really collaborate with them in order to put some structures in place.
So it's interesting to me that like this started out talking about this as an intervention for reducing suspensions, but it's really an intervention about teaching kids how to play together.
Which resulted in less suspensions.
Yeah. Is there anything else I should have asked you about or that you want to talk about that I haven't mentioned yet?
I think one really important piece to all of this is that when I presented to the area principals, we have this high suspension rate and we need to work on this. So what can we do? Not one of our staff members blamed it on the kids. All of our staff members said, what do we need to look at in our system? And I think that is critical, because I don't know that you would find that everywhere, but in Clovis and in our areas specifically that I was working with, 100% of our teams were like, it's not a kid problem, it's not an adult problem, it's a system problem. So what do we need to look at in our system that we can fix?
I think that's a perfect spot to end it. Robin, JJ, Ray, thank you so much for taking the time to share about this.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
High Tech High Unboxed is hosted by me, Alec Patton, with editing by Yesenia Moreno. Our theme music is by Brother Herschel. Huge thanks to Robin, Ray, and JJ for this conversation. If you want to do continuous improvement at your school, we've got great resources for you in the show notes. We also have a link to register for this year's National Summit on Improvement in Education. Thanks for listening.